안녕하세요, kNifties. Welcome to Knittery Nicole. I am Nicole, and we are a crafting community. So grab your work in progress, also known as a whip, and let's get started on our 10-minute crafting break. I am working on the Perler Dog House, Nisha Shin, Casita de Perro. And I'm working on the roof. I already got started a little bit because I wanted to listen to the news. I'm drinking eggnog, so cheers. With a little whiskey float. And I have these really cute gingerbread men. This one's a little messed up. I'll take this one. Look how cute he is. They're iced, and then they're really, really delicious. They're a little bit spicy, which I love. And they have pieces, like real pieces of ginger in them. I rarely eat on camera. And now I know why, because it's really loud. Okay, I'm doing this part is the roof, I think. And I just decided that I would go for it because I've had kind of a hectic day. Yeah, it's been a little bit hectic. And then tomorrow, my boss is coming for my evaluation. And part of me is feeling like, why are you worried, Nicole? What are you worried about? And because my boss is great, and I'm a veteran educator. I just got my 20-year pin, and so it's, I know what I'm doing. But I also, I think my very, very first year that I was back as a speech language pathologist, because I used to be a teacher, I was evaluated, and the person who evaluated me, my boss, clearly, she was such like a fun lady. And so even though at that time, still today, she's probably maybe 5 or 10 years older than me, but she's so hip and cool. It might be less, but I remember that day she was wearing this black leather jacket, and she'd come to the high school where I'm working, and one of the high school boys, he was actually a freshman, he was like, "Hi." And then, without missing a beat, of course, she's like, "Hello." And then he said, like, "How are you doing?" He was really trying to chat her up. And then I said, "Student, do you know that that's the director of special education?" And then he was really embarrassed. And then she said, "Oh, I'm not really the director," which was true at the time. I didn't know, but yes. So I always laugh at that. She really handled it with such panache. But doing speech therapy in a high school, especially with students who are, who just have a lot of abilities, is different than in an elementary school, which is why I like it. That's why I have 2 placements, because I like that there's a difference. But it is, it's funny. But my supervisor, she had a Google Doc, and then she said, "These are my times. These are the time slots, sign up." And none of the time slots that were available by the time I got to the thing were at my elementary school. They weren't days that I'm at my elementary school. And I've been prepping my elementary school students. I've been telling them all along, like, okay, my supervisor's going to come and this is the lesson we're going to do. Let's practice the lesson. But, and they were on board. But then when I went to sign up, those times weren't available. And so I felt weird just pulling them out for no legitimate reason at a time that wasn't planned. So instead, I looked and I saw that there was opening on a day that I'm at the high school. So my supervisor is going to come to the high school again. And the supervisor, she's actually equally attractive. So I hope, I hope none of the boys hit on her. But I do think that the group that she's coming to see, it's a complex group. And I know one of them, I talked to them both today, and I was like, hey guys, I'm going to have my observation tomorrow. Like, can you be on your best behavior and like be really good in speech and like try to like, like act really interested? And both of them agreed. And then one of them has a one-on-one aide, which is an adult that goes with him everywhere. So I told the one-on-one aide, like, hey, can you remind the student, before you guys get here about my observation? And the student that has the one-on-one aide, I think he likes me as a person. And so I think he's going to try really hard not to like be scandalous. But, sometimes the difficulty with dealing with students on the spectrum is that even though they don't want to do something, if they're perseverating, they just keep going and they have a hard time, stopping. So I'm hoping it's going to be okay, but honestly, I'm stressing out a little bit. Anyway, that's why I thought, I need something like even simpler than the crochet I'm doing. And that's why I'm so grateful to Perler, because these are, they are doing well. I mean, it's not that hard. And it's, a little bit like kind of tedious, right? People could describe this as tedious. But you could also describe it as relaxing or very zen. It's interesting how different people have different perspectives. Or maybe the same person has different perspectives. For sure, there was a time in my life when I would have thought that it was too much. Like my son, he looked at it and he was like, oh, that's too much. I don't want to help. But it kind of goes quickly. Like if you just sit and kind of zen out, it goes pretty quickly. I don't know if I'll be able to finish it this Christmas, but I'm gonna try. And if I don't finish it, the good thing about the Perler beads is that they will not go bad. I'll still be able to do them next year. So even if I get, for sure I have one panel done, which is the panel I worked on yesterday or the day before, and then I'm gonna try to get 2 panels done. Here's a funny story. Today we were running a little bit late in the morning. Not so much that we got marked late, but enough that my son was like, hurry up, Mom, hurry up. And I was making my pour over coffee in my to-go cup. And, it takes a minute because it's got to pour over, right? It's not just brewed. Like you've got to boil the water and then pour it over and then let it like drip down. And so I said, hey, why don't you pull the car around? And then he said, really? And I was like, yeah. Of course I was joking. but I can joke like that because I know who he is. But anyway, so then he goes, okay, well, what do I do? Like, put my foot on the pedal and then press the start button. And I was like, yeah, but you know, there's two pedals. There's the brake pedal and the gas pedal. And then as soon as I get into that, I don't know if my voice changes or whatever, but as soon as I start like teaching him something, he gets super annoyed. And maybe my teacher voice or whatever, like, I don't know, annoys him. So then he was like, no, I'll just wait. And then so we got in the car, you know, and it takes us a minute because I have just a ton of things. So I have to get situated. And so when we're running late, I just throw everything in the car and get in and start, you know, like just get started. And then I park on the 3rd floor. So it takes, you know, a minute to like get down to the 1st floor. So by then I'm usually situated and have my glasses and have the cell phone plugged in for the directions. And so we're leaving the garage. And he actually tells me a funny story about 6'7", but you can head to my threads for that, or maybe I'll tell you later anyway. But he was, I think, because he finally got enough sleep after the sleepover. He was on par today. So I said, kid. I actually said his name because I don't say kid, but you know, I said, kid, if you had only learned to drive when I tried to teach you, you know, a year or two ago, back when he was interested. I was going to teach him in a parking lot, by the way. I wasn't going to teach him like on the open road. But I said, if you'd only learned to drive, you could have pulled the car around. And then I said, but it's because you're such a scaredy cat. And then he said, well, I'd rather be a safety rat. And I said, is that a thing? Like, where'd you get that from? Safety rat. Is that a new term? And he's like, no, I just want to be safe. Sorry. At any rate, so the good thing is that, you know, one of us is responsible. Okay, Nifties, this looks like it is a bunch of white, and then it's going to go like this, and it's going to go up to here. Okay, look, notice how these like little corners are notched out, and I think that means it's gonna, like, they're gonna put it together. Is there two? Oh, look at this. It's like 2, 2, 2. This is so interesting. Okay, so the pattern is 2, and then space 2, and then 2. I know I can put it on top, which is what I was doing, but it's a little bit hard to see because I'm not tall enough. So I think this is a better solution by just like counting. So 2, and then 2, and then it looks like 3, and then at the end I'll put it on top and I'll be able to see. This is 1, 2, 3, 2, look, and then this is number 1. Okay, then now I just fill in all of like 2 rows. Okay, I'll work on that. Can you see well, Nifties? Oh no. There you go. That way you can kind of see better. There it is. What did I forget to do? Set a timer. Oh my gosh, Nifties. I'm always telling my stories and then we run out of time. But I do feel more peaceful, and so I'm grateful for you today for just checking in with us and hopefully doing some of your craft. If you can, you could tell us in the comments what you're working on. I would love that. Also, you know, if you've heard the term safety rat, specifically as a counter to scaredy cat, I would love that. The one thing, not the one thing, because there just are so many things, but one thing I do especially love about my kid is just that he just knows who he is. He knows who he is, and he just has this like sense of self, and he doesn't care if people like make fun of him. Not that we should, right? But you know, like when I was a kid, I used to, like, if someone would tease me, I would be so hurt and so self-conscious, and I would just think about it, and I would remember it, like literally for years. For years, this is my phone thing. For years, I would feel self-conscious about, you know, whatever it is that someone had randomly teased me about. Here's something. One day I was in junior high, and I was a teacher's assistant for my algebra class, and I was a 7th grader, and my junior high was 7th and 8th grade, and I was a teacher's assistant. Wait, was I in 7th or 8th grade? I think I was probably actually in 8th grade now that I think about it. And I was a teacher's assistant, and I was passing back papers, so I was like walking in among, you know, the student desks as I was passing them out. And oh, you know what? It wasn't the algebra class. I was in the algebra class, but it was a class of students that were like not in algebra, like maybe 8th grade math or something like that. And so I knew of some of them, but I didn't know them well because they were not in my classes. And then one day, one of the guys said, "Oh my gosh, look at her calves." And then I was immediately embarrassed. But I was like stuck in the middle of their desks. And so I couldn't get out. And he said, okay, I'm sure that boy had a crush on me now that I'm thinking about it. But I didn't think so at the time. I thought he was just like picking on me. But he said, "Oh my gosh, look at her calves." And then the other boy said, "Oh yeah, they're like really big." And then the other first guy was like, "What do you do? Like, how do you work out?" And I said, "Oh, I'm in the marching band." Because I also was in the marching band. And then, you know, you have to march a lot. And then our band was actually a really good band. And we would, like, when I was in 7th grade, we went to Disneyland to perform, which was a big deal because right now I do live right near Disneyland. But back then it was like 8 hours drive to Disneyland. So we had a bus and we stayed overnight and we went to Disneyland. It was, you know, really exciting and fun, but that's because our band was like pretty good. Anyway, and so there was a lot of marching. I think we would do like at least an hour every day after school, and you have to like we used to have these like hats with feathers on the top, like one plume on the top, and when you have those, if you're bouncing too much, your feather like goes all over the place. So you have to roll your foot and, you know, like roll your foot so you glide as you march. They call it marching, but you're really like kind of gliding through so that your feather doesn't like bob around, at any rate. And then, but ever since then, I've been like thinking, oh my gosh, my calves are so big. And they are pretty like muscular, you know, but yes, so unlike my son, who if you say, "Oh, your calves are big," then he would say, "Thank you, I really like them." Or, you know, I just wouldn't care. He doesn't care. And I love that about him. Anyway. I don't know how I got on that like long tangent, but here we are once again, way past time. At any rate, thank you so much for joining us today. And if you could join us tomorrow, I would just be thrilled. 안녕히 계세요.